Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Productivity for Perfectionists, how to stop procrastinating, quiet your inner critic, and love getting it done. And I'm your host, Deborah Hurwitz, and today I am here with one of my teachers and mentors, Michelle Masters. Michelle, thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Happy to be here.
I'm super stoked, you guys. You are in for such a treat. Let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. Best-selling author Michelle Masters has been an NLP trainer and master practitioner since 1995 with NLP Marin and other centers around the world. She combines neuro-linguistic programming, family systems work, matrix energetics, and a variety of other modalities into her work to create lasting change for people in all areas of their lives. Who does not want that? Michelle has clients all over the world in the US, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, India, Asia, Africa, and South America, and she speaks and teaches internationally. Jeffrey Slater and Chris Duncan have nicknamed her the coach's coach because so many of the top coaches in the world have trained and worked with her. I aspire to be one of the top coaches who worked with you. So I'm going to just share with everybody. Michelle, I just completed a 6-month course of just being the super newbie beginner level of NLP. I've likened it to when, as someone who already had a bunch of like Broadway and TV credits, I started to teach myself guitar. I got completely frustrated and bailed because I could hire and write for much better guitar players than what I was doing myself. But I'm sticking with this one because I've been fascinated with NLP for years, and I really am especially delighted to have you here because it's such powerful work, and it was my experience with it was that beautiful, beautiful respite, which for perfectionists is such an important piece of not having to remember to be different, right? Like that we learn this stuff and we think we have to get it exactly right and remember everything just right and do everything just right. And the miracle of this first NLP session that I had several years ago was that it was just different after we had our session.
Yeah.
So freaking powerful.
So people say that all the time. They're expecting, they say, what should I do? Do I have to practice? What should I do? It's like, no, this is like software. When you rewrite software, it stays rewritten. You don't have to like encourage it, go. You don't have to do affirmations, like you have powerful software. You don't have to hold it accountable. I thought we agreed. Like you rewrite it, it runs differently. And that's what this is.
Yes, so well put, so well put. I can see why you teach all over the world with this. So great. So before we get into like the work you're doing and have been doing for many years, one of the things that I really love to do with my experts is really ask about their lives. And I actually want to call attention to one moment that I got to experience with you in our very first weekend, where you cracked open and showed so much truth and vulnerability in a moment when a room full of people had known you for like 10 seconds. And I want to speak to that because I know, and you might know which moment I'm talking about, but well, I'll just share with the audience. You're like, I'm pretty sure. Because that was to me the antithesis of perfectionism that has people shrink back and not show up. And it was when you were just being introduced, the instructors were just being introduced. And Carl, your partner, said, hey, Michelle, would you like to share this part of the story? And something came over you and you started to tear up. You got super emotional and you're like, no, I can't. Yeah. And I was like, what is happening here? What is going on in this room right now? And I remember that. And then, of course, you showed up as you are, just like incredibly professional and candid and knowing your stuff and being so incredibly compassionate and wise. And I know that like as a perfectionist, especially in a world of artists and entrepreneurs where we're constantly performing and showing our brand and who we are and our image, that having a room full of people who did not know who I was supposed to be teaching for the next 6 months, where are those people going to see me cry? Can you tell us a little bit about I know it's just a huge story of your years getting into the work, but how has this work been a part of your life, your personal development, that you can do that and it's congruent and it works?
Well, I'm glad it felt congruent and it worked. I mean, that's what was going on, and there was just no use in trying to pretend, especially because when you try to pretend, the message comes through, like it comes through on one level anyway, and then it's at odds with what you're doing on the surface, and then what you get is this weird discordant thing.
Yeah.
And so rather than that, I would rather just be with what is, and because what had happened was the decision had been made like 2 days before that would be my last time teaching that class, and so I was still processing. And when he said, "So you've been doing this like 25 years, right? Like tell him about it," and in that moment it just all hit me, and this is the last time.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so it was just 25 years of emotion.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love saying that you're saying two really important things at once. One is no use in trying to pretend, because that comes through on some level anyway. Even if you're pretending something else, the truth will come through anyway. Just acknowledging that is really important. And can you say a little bit more about, I would rather be with what is?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I know, and again, from a perfectionist standpoint, or from an I want things to be other than how they are kind of standpoint, how do you even approach being with what is when you fucking hate what is? I don't want any of this shit. I hate what is. So,
well, it kind of takes me back to your previous question, which is kind of how did I get here?
yeah.
Because I was, when I grew up, I was deeply troubled. I mean, I realized at like 17, oh, I've got like real problems. Because I was smart, but I didn't have any sense of worth other than my achievements. It was like I was like an alcoholic, in essence, in that the only way I could feel okay was through achievements.
I knew you were my people.
Yeah. And it crystallized for me when a friend of mine said, you know, if there was a fire, what would you grab and take out of the house? And I said, my trophies. And I saw her face and I thought, oh my God, that's not good. Like even at 17, wow. I'm like, that's messed up.
At 17.
Yeah.
Interesting. Dude, I can relate. I don't know what that says about me, but boy, I get it. Okay, yeah. So you got that was a problem.
I got that it was a problem. I still didn't know what to do about it. And once I picked a college I couldn't brag about, because I had been offered scholarships to colleges that were very bragworthy. And I didn't want to be one of those people who found a way of sneaking in every conversation, you know. That subtle. I just knew it would be too. It was like an alcoholic going to study at a bar. So I actually kind of wandered around for many, many years trying to figure out what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until my 30s that I found this work, and appropriately so, because before that I just wasn't old enough. There's just a certain amount of maturity you need. And in the meantime, I did about 4 years of therapy with a saintly woman who did, help me with a lot of emotional understanding and acceptance and self-awareness. But I stopped at 4 years because nothing had changed. Like it was hugely beneficial, and I still had the same patterns.
Okay, please explain that. I love this conversation because boy, do I like to talk about the difference between therapy and coaching. And so how was it beneficial if nothing changed?
Because I didn't even know the things that I was describing weren't normal. Like, I mean, that's the way I grew up. So of course it was normal. I didn't realize, there was just so much I just didn't realize. Oh, okay, so maybe I wasn't crazy, or maybe the circumstances were just not good, right? Not necessarily anybody's fault.
So the benefit was in the awareness, but you had awareness without anything changing.
Yeah, and a little bit of reparenting. I mean, this saintly woman was kind and asked me about things and showed care and concern, and kind of reflected back some ways that some things were perhaps a little reparenting. Put it that way.
So like some forgiveness, some compassion, some expansion, but wouldn't that, so isn't that some sort of change to feel compassion for something that you didn't even know was a problem before?
I guess you could call that a change. However, I still had the same patterns.
Okay.
So the way I can describe it is, again, let's go back to software. If you've got software running that's not working, if somebody sits there and tells you about all the bugs in your system, but they don't actually change them, you have an increased understanding of the problems in the software, but nothing is different.
I say this all the time, like smart perfectionists, we know our problems, we know where they came from, we know why it happened, we know why we're like this, we can write a freaking book on our problems and still have the problem.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so you just
if you're interested more later, I can tell you kind of how that happens based on kind of how identity is structured. So I don't know how long we have, but if you want to go into that, that's an option.
We have as long as it takes for you to do that. We have about 30 minutes. It's not a ton of time, but I definitely want to get into that for sure. But yeah, so let's fold in what this work did for you then with what the work is, because I think that's going to be obviously really helpful. We sort of teased people enough now with all the beautiful things that are possible. So if we're talking about change as defined by debugging the software so it actually works the way you want it to.
Or sometimes flat out getting new software, yeah.
Flat out getting, okay, talk to me about that, because I only got one brain as far as I know.
Yeah. Well, but the software is the neural patternings. That your brain's your hardware. Mm-hmm. So the software is the pattern, the codes that are running. So sometimes we're revising bugs, but sometimes we're actually installing whole new, like arranging for whole new neural nets to make friends with each other in ways that create capabilities that weren't there before.
I love whole new neural nets to make friends with each other. So of course even though I'm still at total newbie level, I've of course done a pretty deep dive for 6 months into all of this. So for those of us in I have never heard of NLP seats, can you speak a little bit more about how we arrange for whole new neural nets to make friends with each other? I know it's too gigantic a question.
It's a big question.
Let me put it a little bit differently. What's the difference between having awareness and feelings about the thing and actually going to work on the thing? Like how do we actually go to work and change this programming? What is that all about?
To change the programming, you have to actually get access to the programming. So right here, let me go into my little how identity is structured.
Please do.
Because most of the things we believe about ourselves and the world are in place by age 3. Pretty much all of our beliefs are in place by 6. Okay. Now, these parts of the cerebral cortex, the parts of the brain where the shiny parts we're so proud of and like to lord over the rest of the animal kingdom, that's not fully developed until somewhere between 20 and 25 for women, somewhere between 25 and 30, or as Carl says, somewhere between 25 and death for men.
Yes. I've experienced that firsthand.
It's the last part of the brain to come online. Mm-hmm. There's your emotions come online somewhere around birth, and then there's the oldest part of the brain. Some people call it the reptile brain, fully functional in utero. Okay? So most of the beliefs are made when this is really not doing much. And mostly what you have are emotions and this very ancient, simple wiring. Whatever a kid experiences, they start making associations in the womb. Okay? There's no consciousness, but there's associations. I'm here, it's like this. And those get associated. Those become beliefs.
I'm here, it's like this. Great distillation.
Simultaneous, ergo related. So the brain just associates. Okay. There's no executive function to go, wait a minute. It's not my fault that they're all crabby here, or they're all freaked out. There's no part of the brain that's available to do that at that age.
Got it. Okay. So, simultaneous and therefore related is really helpful. Oh my gosh.
So it just starts spinning off association after association after association, and these become later beliefs, and they become the foundation of our identity, our sense of who we are, what we deserve, what the world's like, and our worldview. Okay? That's pretty much done by 6. Most of it by 3. And beliefs about perfectionism, between 3 and 5, that's when those get cemented into place.
Oh, here we go. Okay. So here I was thinking that I was all smart because I figured out all the shit that happened when I was 6 that made all these decisions. You're telling me perfectionism 3 to 5? Yep. Okay. I'm happy to ask a more specific question, but I just want you to riff on perfectionism, and I'm just going to sit back and learn.
Okay. So back to my original thing. So these beliefs, they get created and they get automated because they're learnings. And it's good that learnings are automated. Otherwise, every morning when you woke up, you'd have to relearn how to walk, talk, you control your bladder, right?
Right.
So it's good learning is automated, but some of what's automated is, oh, the world is not safe, or I'm not okay, or I'm not enough, or these are some of the associations that get automated.
Yeah.
So if you think of a building,
Yeah.
if someone's 50 years old, let's just make up a number.
Right.
The first 3 to 6 stories are the foundation. Let's say the first 3 to 6 layers of that building are the foundation.
Right.
And then you build on top of that, 1 floor per year. If someone at the age of 50 goes to a workshop, has an epiphany, perhaps there is more to me. Perhaps life doesn't have to be perfect. Perhaps I am already fine. This thing at 50 does not, what's happening on the 50th floor does not change what's happening in the basement.
Ah, so powerful. Okay.
So this is where people try to change it from. They try to change it from now. Be here now. Okay, that would be fine if we just came onto the planet now.
Yeah.
But because we're running ancient patterning, which is independently suspended.
Wait, independently suspended?
Well, it's down there in the basement. It doesn't give a rat's hindquarters about what's going on in the 50th floor.
Got it. We said suspended. I got confused, but yes, down in the basement. Yeah.
Yeah. Independently owned and operated. Let's put
There we go. Independently owned and operated. Oh.
These parts of the brain have really shoddy interfacing.
Well, okay.
So what most people try to do is they try to rearrange the furniture on the 50th floor when there are huge cracks in the foundation, and they wonder, why does the building keep tipping? They shove all the furniture onto the other side, and there's still something in the foundation that makes it all.
Got it. Okay. That's a really great analogy.
Okay.
So specifically with perfectionism, what's the stuff that happens between 3 and 5 that brings us to, I'll just lay a couple of my favorites out there, the all or nothing thinking. If I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. If I can't do everything, I will do nothing, right? Because that's what gives us the procrastination, the paralysis, all the doubts, all that stuff. Well, and we'll speak about those more specifically, but that kind of like black and white, all or nothing, that level of perfectionism. How is that showing up at 3 years old?
Well, there are certain windows when kids are learning very specific things. And there's 2 different things going on between the age of 3 and 5. There's, first off, an explosion of capability. Like the difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old in terms of what they're capable of is enormous in terms of control of their body, language. It's just enormous, right? So there's this
language, yeah.
Yeah, this geometric explosion of capability.
Yeah.
No sense of proportion.
Okay.
No right? If you tell a 4-year-old, I remember seeing an ArtLink letter show, and he was interviewing different kids. They were all about 8, and we were actually even older.
Yeah.
And he said to this kid, so how much do you think a hammer costs? And the kid thought about it for a while and went, about $100. And he said, okay, and how much does a house cost? And the kid thought about it. He said, about $100. And like every question, that's even at 8. So at 3 to 4, they really have no sense of proportion.
Interesting.
No sense of time. There's now and there's never.
Right.
Right. There's no 5 minutes from now. That does not register for them.
Yes.
So
yes.
There's now or not now, which equates to never, which is why they're not terribly patient. So that's going on. There's no proportion.
Yeah.
There's no sense of gradation. There's no sense of there's no grayscale. That's the left hemisphere, which doesn't really fire up until like 8 years old. That's why at 8 you start getting lots of questions about how does Santa's sleigh fly exactly. That's the left hemisphere finally starting to kick in gear, but it's not really heard from before that.
Okay.
The other thing that's going on is something called magical thinking. So during this window, 3 to 5, kids think they control the world. They think that the world, that their actions or emotions cause the world. It's a step on a crack, break your mother's back age.
Interesting.
So if a kid gets angry and grandpa dies, it's like, it's because I got angry. If anything bad is going on, the child will take both blame for it and they'll take on the job of fixing it. Because explosion of capabilities.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
no sense of proportion, exploding sense of capability. So they take the fall for it. It's my fault. I will fix it. And then the scheme they come up with is usually something along the lines of, I will be good or I will be perfect.
Okay. Yes.
And there is
My
no,
fault and I'll fix it. And
yeah,
it'll be perfect.
there's no sense of proportion. Now, this gives them hope because now they've got a plan, right? Because before things were bad and they had no plan, now at least they've got a plan.
Can you give me an example before we go any further of like, because I'm so feeling it. I feel this like, but can you give it like a specific example of, oh, I don't know, let's say someone's mom, right? 4-year-old. What's the kind of thing that would happen that would trigger this process you're describing, right? The association that gets made. It's my fault and I'll fix it. And now I have hope because I have a plan. Like I'm right with you. But I want to really make clear for our audience, this isn't like the 4-year-old sees on TV that there was a tsunami in Japan, right? It's like, no, what's going on like in the 4-year-old's life?
Actually,
or it could be the tsunami in Japan.
Could be that too. I had a client who was German, who was 3 when the Second World War started, and on some level she had always held herself responsible.
Wow. Okay.
So generally it's like there's mom or dad is not happy or safe, or they're unhappy with each other, or they're stressed about money, or blah blah blah. It might be, if it goes into high gear if an event happens, like mom or dad divorce, or mom or dad go to the hospital, or go to the mental hospital. Or
just those things you just said, that mom and dad aren't happy, or they're not happy with each other, or they're fighting about money. That's got to be like 85% of the population right there.
Here we go. Yeah, welcome to planet Earth. Interesting design.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 4-year-old witnesses a fight. Mommy and daddy are fighting about money.
Doesn't even have to witness a fight. It could just be because they're they feel their parents' stuff, whether they understand it or not.
That's, yep. Mm-hmm.
So mom and dad might be fine on the surface, but if underneath there's all this stuff going on, the kid feels it, they still take the blame for it, they still kick into high gear to try and fix it.
That whole pretending, but it's there on another level thing.
Yeah, exactly, because it comes through it. And like I said, the children aren't conscious of it, but they feel it.
Yeah.
And so they respond.
Yeah.
And then in a perfect world, when that kid hit 18, like your iPhone, the software would update.
Yeah.
You would get a new operating system, but our brains are not designed to update.
Oh boy.
So then we end up.
That's the bad news.
Then we end up spending years going to therapy, joining groups, reading books.
Mm-hmm.
And
before we get into the updating, what are the kinds of decisions? So I get the association. It's my fault. I'll fix it. I'm going to fix it. So now I have hope and I have a plan. What are those plans? Like, what are the kinds of decisions that we're talking about that 4-year-old will make, and how will that show up then in their behaviors in their lives?
The most common ones are, I will be good,
mm-hmm.
or I will be perfect,
mm-hmm.
or I will love them so much this will all be okay.
Mm. And I will love them so much can often turn out like, I will take care of them. I will meet all of their needs. I will people please. I like the people pleasers who are just kind of like compelled to exhaust and deplete themselves, trying to make it show up somehow out there, even though they know, like, this isn't good for me. This isn't good for me. And ostensibly, intellectually, they'll recognize this isn't good for them either. They can't stop, right? We can't stop.
They can't stop.
And
kids have no way of knowing that it is futile. It's hopeless. It's never going to work. There's never been a child born in the history of humanity who did not want to heal their parents. There's also never been a child born in the history of humanity who has pulled it off. But they all try, and they try in predictable ways.
Got it. Okay. So 18, I'm going, why not 8 and 10 and 12 and 14 and all, why don't we get like new updates all along the way? But let's go with 18. Now you're going out into the world and you need to be fitted with the proper software, like in the Matrix, I know Kung Fu, right? Like now we need to be sorted out so we can go out and be functional adults, and our brains are not designed to update. No. Well, fuck, now what?
No. And so now what was basically you had to ride that identity out until you died. In the past, that's how people got identity change, was to die or to almost die. Now that we have these tools, we can actually create those kind of changes without people having to die, get reborn, and go through middle school again, for God's sake. To avoid that.
Okay, got it. So I totally get like the story of how this all comes to be, this notion of identity getting formed at this very early age. I love especially the between 3 and 5 stuff, all of these things happening at once, the magical thinking, explosion of capability, all of that. And I can think back, because of course I've done a bunch of personal work, so I can totally think back into some of those fragments of memory and put it into that space of the explosion of capabilities, and then like the plan and the hope and all the rest of that. Mm-hmm. And now you're talking about this work that sounds pretty darn magical, and we are going to get to your money magic and all the rest of that stuff. But right now it sounds pretty magical. Like, we're just going to get in there and tinker with the brain and reprogram. Okay, so I don't have a keyboard interface to my brain, right? Like, how do you actually distinguish? Like, what is the work? What is the actual reprogramming, the connecting of this to this that can happen through just speech, right? Like, I mean, it's conversations that actually accomplishes this work. It's not like you're hooking people up to electrodes or something.
Well, actually, there are people who are getting some really nice changes using neurofeedback, but the way we're doing it, a lot of it's conversational, but then there is some intentional creation of associations called anchoring. Mm-hmm. Which is where most of the magic happens. But to change patterning,
yes,
you need to access the parts of the brain that were developing when it was created.
Okay.
Basically, you need to go into the first 3 levels. So it's not inner child work per se, but when you go back into the experiences where the patterning formed, yes, you're actually accessing the parts of the brain that were developing then, and those parts of the brain are holding that old structure. Mm. So if you're changing things over here, but not where it's held, right, it doesn't. But if you actually get access in here, change that, then big change. Yeah.
Got it. So can you, obviously we're not going to do a whole 2-hour session right now, but can you give us just a little tiny bit of a window into, like, for example, the sorts of questions that you might ask, or what is it that, I was just about to say, what is it that lets you know? What is it? What sort of information are you looking for to access these places in the brain? And what are you doing with that information?
Both verbal content that people give me, and also their physiology. Changes in their breathing, their skin color, pupil dilation, eye moisture, where they look when they think about things. All of that is unconscious manifestations of what's going on.
Uh-huh. So like when you're having a conversation with someone that you are bringing the work to, right? You're working on them or with them. You're having a conversation with them, and everything they're doing, not just what they're saying, but where they're looking and what's happening with their body, is giving you information.
Tons of information
about what's going on with them. And because you've been doing this for so long and you know what the hell you're doing, unlike some of us over here, you know where to go. Oh, that's significant. I'm going to ask about that. We're going to talk about that. And then you start to get the information about what was going on at the time that whatever this problem they want to change was encoded. Mm-hmm. And then talk more about the resources, the anchors, like what happens that you now don't have to remember to be different.
Right. So, have you ever had food poisoning from a restaurant?
Knock wood, no, actually, but I've been super ill for sure.
Well, anybody who has,
yes,
even if they loved that restaurant before, after that, if you ask them about that restaurant, there'll be a visceral response, right? They don't have to remember to have that response, right? A visceral association. Mm-hmm. Human brains make associations. We are association making machines. And so if you do it correctly, there is a way to use the brain's tendency to make associations to create, basically you can take whatever you want, wherever you want. So let's say somebody's got control issues. This is a kissing cousin of perfectionism, right? Mm-hmm. Same age range usually that you go back to.
Yep.
So let's say mom was unstable or drinking, or one parent was unstable or drinking, or both.
Mm-hmm.
And so things are not stable, and all kids have a need for stability actually all creatures have a need for predictability and stability.
Certainty, yeah.
And so the kid will go into, okay, I need to control this. Now, the sheer lunacy of a 4-year-old controlling like a family like that is evident to an adult, but not to the 4-year-old. And so, and because it seems like life is dependent on it, they go into overdrive, and because they have a child's sense of proportion, they don't have a way of knowing, one, if it's working.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, or two, that this is absurd. So they kind of lock that plan into place, and the feeling is, if I don't control things, everything will spin out of control, everything will fall apart. And that belief is
The
not
making of a control freak, ladies and gentlemen.
That belief is not designed to update itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then that becomes part of their relation to the world. They're relating to the world because we use our early experiences as a template for the rest of the world.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got the child patterning at work, where it was fixed at a point where the child had no way of knowing whether it was working or whether it was absurd. There was just this pattern of, if I don't control it, the world will go to hell.
Right.
Okay.
So if we access like the age at which that got cemented into place, like it'll probably be like 3, 4, or 5 with that one, probably. Not always, but probably.
Yeah.
We'll have the client step back into that experience and describe it, and we'll talk about what's going on and what was that kid feeling and thinking and all that. And then we'll have them come back to their adult self. Like, we got to get the adult brain fired back up.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will use the thing called anchoring,
Yep.
which is intentionally creating association.
Yes.
So I will often ask the person something like, so if there was a situation at your work where things were really, they needed somebody to kind of get them sorted out, would you refer them to a 4-year-old? And the person will go like this, and I will grab them, and that's absurd gets associated with that squeeze. I give them on the arm.
Yes.
And then if I have them go step into that 4-year-old and squeeze that, it makes a neural connection between what the 4-year-old was experiencing and what the adult knows.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And actually, because that area was, before, that 4-year-old brain was a little bit, it's called encapsulated.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a lot, it's hard to explain in simplistic terms, but
yeah,
when somebody gets sucked into one of those, they lose access to their adult resources.
I think we've all had that. And this actually is so perfect. If I want to jump to this question, and thank you for that. It's a beautiful distillation. And I appreciate you allowing me to put you on the spot with, like, summarize 35 years worth of work in 2 sentences, please. But that's really helpful. And so, this notion of, we're going to actually teach the adult who's currently operating in the mode of the 4-year-old retroactively to that 4-year-old who's currently driving the bus. Actually, you can step aside and not be driving the bus right now. It's a little crazy that you'd be driving the bus, and it's okay, and the world's not going to end. You actually don't have to drive the bus. It's actually not the best plan. And we have a better plan to put into place.
Yeah, let somebody who's taking the course drive the damn bus.
Right. So super powerful. Okay, so that's great. And I know that we've all, especially, perfectionists, we get into that, like, fight, flight, or freeze place. Something's important. Something matters to us. I said I was going to do this, and I've been saying I'm going to do this for days, months, years, right? Whether it's write my masterpiece or clean up the kitchen or find my man or whatever it is, right? And there's been something that I've not been doing, and I'm procrastinating. And so that it can feel so all or nothing. I have to, I can't. And I know that kind of moment of, there's a 5-year-old running the show. Now, one of the things that I talk about a lot when I'm working with artists and entrepreneurs is talking to that inner critic, that voice that's like, what if you suck? What if you're never going to make it? What if you shouldn't even bother? And so we don't bother and we stop. But, like, what can we do in this like just kind of pick a moment, and I'm again totally putting you on the spot, but if you're dealing with someone who is identifying as a perfectionist, or in whatever way there's like high stakes, right? This matters to me internally, or this matters to me, like people will know or care, right? And there's something that I need and want to do. I'm not doing it because I'm scared, or I need it to be perfect, or whatever it is. So I just keep pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. Just the thought of approaching this task, like I could pass out. I'm so scared. I'm just going to a little bit of an extreme place.
No, I understand.
If someone can't come to you for a 2-hour session to sort out that particular stuck moment, if we have our audience here right now, and by the way, I know lots of people will be wanting to go to you for a 2-hour session after this, but if you were to just give someone, our audience right now, a little bit of guidance of what we could do in this moment. I mean, one of the things that I tell people to do is literally just breathe. Just freaking breathe.
Breathing, especially in your belly, not so much your chest. But breathing into your belly can sometimes force a parasympathetic reset. Because what you talked about, the fight, flight, freeze, is called sympathetic arousal, which is not nearly as much fun as it sounds like.
Right, exactly. I was just going to say.
Yeah. And it's that, and that's the creature wiring, because it cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat. Right. It only has threat or not. It's very simple wiring. There's only threat or no threat. And that's good, because you don't want complicated wire. If there's a rhino running at you, you don't want wiring that's going to go, is this really a threat? I don't know. We're all God's creatures, aren't we all? You don't want neurology that's going to do that.
We're all God's
neurology
creatures.
that's going to shoot first and ask questions later.
Yeah, got it.
So that's what we've got. Now we have to deal with the bugs of that. And it is ancient wiring that's still running. Yeah. So your system is actually preparing for death. And it might only be speaking in public, but as far as your system can tell, this is life-threatening. Right. And so it is responding in kind, which means it's taking the cortex offline. Taking the cortex offline, so important. Okay, so we're in this moment. We're naming the moment of procrastination, the moment of I'm not gonna do this, as a form of sympathetic arousal. I love it's not as fun as it sounds. Creature wiring kicking in, taking the cortex offline, and that one thing that we could do is to trigger a parasympathetic reset of a deep breath into the belly. What else, if you've got somebody who's really in their head, like a lot of times as perfectionists, we're just so in our head, right? I'm getting people into the body all the time, into a more somatic experience. But if you're just like, I'm sorry, that's just a more somatic experience of terror.
Exactly. So like, let's say I've got a very low threshold for woo-woo, right? I need just like, give me something that I can do to shift that fork in the road moment from not going to happen to there's somewhere for me to go here. There's something for me to think about. There's something for me to do. There's hope, right? A different kind of hope.
Well, the thing that works the best is the thing you told me not to say, which is to see somebody and do a proper piece of work on it. If the software is giving you a problem, unless you rewrite it, everything else is patchy and buggy. Got it.
Totally. I understand we're not fixing the whole problem in that moment.
I know. Sorry.
And so I so appreciate that you're going for like, what's a real programming fix, like a meaningful programming fix. And I totally get that we really need a session to properly do that. But knowing what you know about how this work works, even just to give someone a sense of this thing that feels immutable, this thing that feels like I truly can't, maybe I can try on that's not real. Like, what is a way that we could just kind of get into a place of like, checking out a different possibility, checking out a different reality, just in the context of what you know to be so about what the brain is telling us in that moment. Because in that moment, it feels so real. It feels so life or death.
Yeah, and so it's a hard thing, because what you're asking me to give someone's adult brain options when quite often that adult brain is not available. So
even knowing that, to be honest, even just knowing that, like give yourself a break. Okay, guys, perfectionists, give yourself a break. The you that knows all the stuff that you know, the you that knows better, the you that made the promise to do it in the first place, all those yous are all that adult brain. And Michelle, what you're telling us is none of that shit is actually available in the moment that the fear shows up, like blinding panic.
Well, if it's blinding panic, then for sure none of that stuff is available. The adult brain is just not online.
It's just not online.
No, it's just not online. What you have is a 2 or 3-year-old who's in adult clothing, but
So it's like, go have a Twinkie and call it a day.
now, I will give you one thing that's like major triage that might help, but it's
triage. I love triage. I'm a
it's
big
not
fan
a
of triage.
permanent solution.
Understood.
So while you're breathing into the belly, you can do it right now. Cross your ankles.
Mm-hmm.
And then put your fingers together like that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, cross your ankles the other way. It will feel weird.
Uh-huh.
And relace your fingers so the other index fingers on top. Again, will feel weird.
Yeah. If you do a lot of yoga, it feels less weird, but yes.
And then breathe into your belly while you do that, because it's just kind of forcing the two hemispheres of your brain to talk to each other more than they are.
Oh, that is fascinating. Oh, that's really interesting. And especially for creative projects, which so much of the work with artists and entrepreneurs is like the fear of the blank page. Yeah. The fear of the cold calling list, right? It's like the fear of that it's up to me to do something, and oh shit, I can't. What if it sucks? I don't want to. So getting the right and left hemisphere to talk to each other, getting the creative, poetic, generative piece of the brain to just show up, as opposed to there being only critical, analytical, fearful, this is never going to work, you can't sort of stuff. That sounds really helpful.
You kind of need both, because the right hemisphere, the what you're calling the creative one, it has a tendency to hyper generalize, and so it's easy to get lost or overwhelmed over there. Whereas the left hemisphere can dissociate a bit and can go, oh, you know what, this is just this. Whereas the right hemisphere, wait, is this my right hemisphere? The right hemisphere is like, ah!
That's so funny. I'm such a romantic with the whole artist piece. I'm like, the right hemisphere is where all the poetry and color and dreaming lives, and it's wonderful and amazing. And you're like, yeah, the right hemisphere can also freak the fuck out, and we need the left hemisphere to calm down. Oh, that's hilarious.
They work together. Ideally, they work together well, and so this can help just get them, whichever hemisphere is not operating at the moment, because really we're one hemisphere dominant. It can kind of get the other one in on the game a little bit, and that will often kind of help to calm things down. And
just having, and I totally get it. Like, this is not replacement for the deep work of real reprogramming, but just those types of little moments to just open something up where we're just so locked in, to just unlock and open something up, even if it's just a sliver of a window when we really need to walk through the door. So helpful. So thank you so much for that. And this is clearly just a tiny little, speaking of slivers of a window into what this work can be, and what you do specifically, Michelle. And you're really good at what you do, and I really appreciate you coming in to do this. I know people are going to want more of you, and I'm very happy to share that your free gift, which the link is going to be below here, you'll be able to check in on that, and we didn't get a chance to talk about money magic, but you guys are getting a sneak peek in your free gift, a bonus chapter not included in your money magic book, talking about the quantum effect of manifesting things and experiences beyond our understanding of cause and effect. I absolutely love this. Yes, hold up money magic. There we go. Thank you very much. Michelle does money magic workshops, and we didn't even get into talking about money magic, but let's face it, that kind of transformation around money, and so much of what presents in our adult everyday lives is stuff around money, but you're really just doing more of what it is that you're talking about, right? Getting into those old stories, getting into that programming, something that got locked in early on, that when you were 3 or 4 or 5 was definitely not connected with dollars, but then became
security.
Security, exactly. Yeah. So really, really powerful stuff in there. We could do another hour, but we're way past 30 minutes, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you again so much. You guys, this is Michelle Masters, and you definitely want to check out her free gift, and check out NLP Marin, which is the organization she's a partner in, and that I'm now working with as well, with great pleasure and anticipation of next stages. This has been another episode of Productivity for Perfectionists. Come back tomorrow for our next episode. Thank you, Michelle Masters. I'm your host, Deborah Hurwitz. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Bye.